Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Kelly and I today for this incredible webinar that I am so pumped for specifically. We are just so grateful that you all took time out of your busy schedules to be here with us today. So as we are getting started, I like to ask a little icebreaker question for the participants in the chat. So I have probably downed 2 or 3 cups of coffee already today. So I have morning drink orders on the mind. So in the chat, feel free to put what your go-to order is in the morning, whether it's tea or coffee. I've even seen people in the past say like Mountain Dew or soda. So whatever is your morning go-to order, feel free to put that in the chat. What about you, Kelly? What's your go-to order?
Well, like you, I'm heavily caffeinated today and most mornings. So I usually start with just a black cup of coffee because I'm one of those people where I kind of can't function unless I have some caffeine in me. But then later in the morning, I'll go for like an iced latte of some sort. So that's usually my go-to.
I
Yeah.
love it. Are you like iced drinks all year round? Because I'm hot drinks all year round, which isn't great living in Dallas, but I love a hot drink.
Yeah, I tend to go for the ice later in the day. I'm in San Diego, not as warm as Dallas, but I tend to lean towards the iced coffee. Yeah.
I love that. Well, feel free to continue posting in the chat what your go-to order is. I see Jody put coffee or sips of Diet Coke. I have my Dr. Pepper with me right now, so I feel you on that, Jody. Iced coffee year-round, Cassie. Black coffee. We have so much diversity when it comes to our morning orders, so I love it. With that, I will do a couple little housekeeping things and then pass it over to Kelly. But make sure to ask any questions in the Q&A. If you look on Zoom, there's a little Q&A box at the bottom. You can add those questions in there, and if we have time at the end, we will get to them. Additionally, I will send out the recording after the webinar, so be on the lookout for that. And towards the very end, I will share the SHRM and HRCI codes, so stick around for those as well. There will also be an opportunity for an interactive part in the webinar too, so make sure to stay tuned for that, and we will share the code and the URL when the time comes. And with that, Kelly, I'll pass it over to you.
Amazing. Okay, so I just want to confirm you can see my screen all right.
I can see it. It looks like it's in presentation mode.
How
There we go.
about,
Perfect.
oh no, hold on. Sorry, technical difficulties here. And Kaylee and I just tested this and you wouldn't know it. But hold on. Okay.
That's perfect. I can see it.
Amazing. Okay. Well, hello, everybody. We are looking forward to spending the next hour with you today. I'm going to be sharing a new groundbreaking approach to well-being at work that's going to empower you to really co-create a thriving culture with your employees. Now, we take a fresh approach to work wellness. So this isn't some of the same recycled information that you've probably heard before. We really do have these innovative insights that our research kind of challenges some of the traditional ideas that's kind of out in the world. And I'll be sharing those with you today. So for example, when I tell people that my company has a platform that elevates work well-being, I'll often get the response like, oh, so you help teams have work-life harmony. But work-life harmony does not necessarily equal work well-being. And there are some other things that may surprise you. Some employees don't need strong purpose necessarily to thrive at work. Employees aren't always looking for growth opportunities. Some employees don't need strong connection to be their happiest, healthiest selves. And some people don't need to be extremely passionate about what they do to be engaged. And we're going to dive into the data that supports all of this good stuff. But here's the agenda for today's work well-being journey. We are going to focus on empowering you again to elevate well-being, not just for your employees, but also for yourself, because as leaders, you need to care for your well-being before you can take care of the people around you. So first, we're going to cover some of the key background. I'll dive into some of the data. we'll talk about the 6 key mindset shifts that really lay the foundation for our 5-step roadmap. So that's where we're really going to take all these insights and put them into action. And then we're going to try to leave some time at the end for Q&A. As Kaylee said, we're going to kind of circle back to that. So throw some of your questions in the Q&A and we will get to those at the end. Now, I want to share a little bit about me and my work well-being journey. So my story really stems back from growing up in Chicago and seeing my mom go from at one point thriving at work to pretty much complete misery at work. And it was really devastating to see the negative impact that had on her, it had on our family. And unfortunately, I found myself in a really similar situation. I was in this toxic organization for many years and I was burnt out to a crisp. I was taking, it took a very serious mental, emotional, and physical toll. And it really, it took me hitting some real lows before I woke up and got clarity and decided to really pursue well being in my own life, at work and outside of it. And then I developed such a passion for it, I really started helping others do the same. So I moved from Chicago out to California, first to San Francisco, then down to San Diego, where I live currently, and really spent time reviving myself. I became a meditation teacher. I spent a lot of time in nature hiking. And this is where I dove a lot deeper into human behavior research, why we do what we do, researching things like stress and our emotional states, and then also going deeper into the psychology side of things. So different brain training, psychological safety at work, really coaching on burnout and stress and culture and leadership. And then it was in about 2017 when my mom and I, who's one of the other co-founders of Motives, met. We're really thrilled that well-being and work were being used in the same sentence, because that was not the case not that long ago. But then we wondered, why is stuff still so dang bad? Why is stress and burnout so high and retention and happiness so low? So that's when we really began our research journey and developed our whole platform that includes things like our assessment tool you're going to hear about today, our offsites and workshops, and leadership hub. And in the last year, about a few months ago, my book, Work, Life, Well, Live, was published. And that was really a very cool full circle moment for me because I was able to dedicate this book to my mom. And this photo is actually in the gratitude section of the book. And our mission really is to create a future of work that is better so that we can take those hardships from the past that I'm sure everybody here today can say that they've kind of experienced their own work well-being journey and make the future better. Because our research shows only 16% of people are thriving at work, but this ill-being is really detrimental to everybody. Our experiences at work are going to inevitably bleed into our lives outside of work, the lives of those around us, our communities and families, and bleed into the bottom line, of course, of the organizations that we work for. And here are some other stats that kind of illuminate this state of ill-being. 19% of workers are miserable at work and 60% emotionally detached from their work. 56% of employees feel that their leaders just don't even care about their well-being. And I could keep sharing other data points, but I think we all know that we can and must do better. And that's partially why you're here today, because leaders play a really big role. And it's not just about the emotional salary. It's about the emotional salary, not just about that financial salary, because the landscape really has shifted post-pandemic. Employees' hearts and minds have changed about what they desire and deserve at work. 56% of employees left their jobs because they felt their employer didn't support their well-being. Nearly 70% of the C-suite were seriously considering quitting for a job that better supports their well-being. 93% of workers consider their well-being to be equally as critical as their salary. And we found through our own research that 94% of employees think companies need to do more to meet the needs of their employees so that they do have greater health and happiness at work. And we know that when we get to well-being, it means big benefits. Like organizations that support mental health and well-being see a 36% improvement in engagement. Employees who feel their company supports their well-being are 91% more likely to recommend their workplace to others. And organizations with high engagement and a focus on humanizing work experience things like 21% higher profitability, 20% higher sales, 17% higher productivity. And again, I could keep sharing many more stats that show when we're well at work, good stuff happens. And of course, creating humanized workplaces where people are healthy and happy is the right thing to do. But bonuses, the data proves some pretty amazing outcomes come from that, like happiness and engagement and connection and mental health. And research has also proven that, all of these elements are deeply interconnected. When employees are more engaged and genuinely happy with well-being, it naturally leads to longer-term retention, collaboration, performance. But the question then becomes, how do we unlock this sense of thriving as the catalyst for all of these interconnected benefits? And the place we really have to start is, what even is work well-being? How are we defining this? So Kaylee, if you wouldn't mind dropping the link in the chat, we would love to hear your thoughts. What does work well-being mean to you? How would you define it in a few words? And you can also scan this QR code. You could go to slido.com and put this code in, but share a few words about how you think about work well-being. So we'll wait for people to share, but I always love seeing kind of the diverse interpretations here. And yes, Jody, you will be sent the PowerPoint of this presentation. See your question in the chat there. So contentment, fulfillment, productivity, balance, psychological safety, fairness, and inclusion. We see a lot of fulfillment, contentment, productivity, being part of the culture, connection, fairness, and inclusion. That's great. Safety, emotional safety, representation, and a lot more inclusivity. A few more people are sharing here. Autonomy, yeah. All right, thank you everybody for sharing. Now we're going to go back to okay, I just want to double check. Kaylee, you can see my screen okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So I think what we can see here is these are all really great ideas around work wellness, but it becomes tough when we don't have clarity and that shared mindset about what well-being and thriving at work really means. Because something we say a lot is that goal clarity equals goal achievement. So, if you don't have a clear goal to guide you and your team towards work well-being, it's going to make it a lot more tough to actually reach that goal. So we need a way to cultivate that shared meaning and mindset in a way that's true for everybody. And our perspective of, thriving at work, well-being at work is going to be heavily influenced by what we learn and absorb from others. It's what we hear in a podcast, we watch in a TED Talk, or learn growing up in our own families. So what is the world saying happy and being happy and healthy at work is all about? Well, there's a lot of noise out there. And quite frankly, a lot of BS for us to really navigate through. There's endless articles like the 5 ways to boost employee well-being. And you'll have one thought leader claiming, your best work life is about growth and hustling to reach your potential. But a different thought leader will say, forget about the hustle. Work-life harmony is the golden ticket. And as leaders, you're constantly being pulled in 1,000 different directions, hearing, it's about purpose, or wait, it's about belonging or appreciation. And of course, we deal with that classic push and pull between flexibility and work from home is most important, or no, creating a culture in person and having that connection is more important, which makes it really difficult. And researchers also can't seem to make up their mind about what employees want and need most. Research finds that many things like autonomy or variety or coworkers being friends, is the key to work happiness. And research reveals the #1 reason people walk out the door is because of a bad boss. But other research shows it's because of a lack of fairness or, it's because of a bad culture or a toxic company culture. So I could fill up pages and pages in this presentation with stats that add more confusion than clarity, because everybody's saying different things that contradict one another, and it can feel overwhelming. And that's something we've heard from leaders, is that it can feel like a lot. And when I first started on this journey, I felt very overwhelmed as well. Because of course there can be truth and benefit to this information, but it doesn't help us when we're claiming that it's these three magic ingredients or this is more important than that. So we need a way to really organize, prioritize, and simplify all of this in a way that helps us, because we felt like, man, we're just drowning in information, but starving for real wisdom. And we dove deep into research on my team in pursuit of that wisdom. And we discovered there are 28 of these human needs that are at the heart of what thriving at work is truly all about. These 28 psychological, emotional, and social needs, what we call motives, fall into these 10 overarching buckets or motive domains that our data group them into. Now, many of these motives are easy to kind of get a general grasp of what they are. And we also have them on our website as well if you want to go more in depth. But there are a few that are less obvious, so I'll give a little bit more of an explanation for some of those. So in the company connection domain, we have the shared culture, prestige, and trustworthy leadership motives. So prestige is really the need to feel pride for what you do and where you do it, that you work at a trusted, admired company, you work with really high quality people, and this could manifest at a household brand name or a startup with an admirable mission, for example. In the meaning domain, we have the passion and purpose motives. In the advancement domain, growth, challenge, and future success. In the stimulation domain, variety and innovation. In the freedom domain, flexibility, autonomy, and free expression. Now, free expression is very closely linked to the idea of psychological safety. So the need to feel your voice and other people's voices are heard at work, that you feel comfortable to speak freely and bring up your opinions or concerns. In the balance domain, we have the balanced pace motive and work-life harmony. And balanced pace was an interesting need that came from the research. And this was more around not wanting to always feel rushed to get your work done, but that you could work at a pace and be given the time to really do a job well to the best of your ability. In the comfort domain, the security, calmness, and fairness motives. In the personal connection domain, manager support, peer connection, belonging, and fun. In the significance domain, peer and company appreciation and self-esteem. And self-esteem is really about this blend of internal confidence and external value and validation, really wanting to feel like you are a pivotal part of the team and that your work adds significant value. And last but not least, in the success domain, we have the achievement, personal strengths, and clear expectations motives. So when we think about what really is a thriving culture, it's when these 28 motives are honored, protected, and strengthened at the organizational, team, and individual level. And we're going to talk more about kind of what that means. But I want to spend a few moments just chatting about why these motives matter. Met motives means greater mental health and well-being. About 70% of employees with well-met motives felt that they had strong well-being, mental health, and were living their best possible work life, compared to only about 10% of those with unmet needs. And when motives are met, people are twice as likely to stay in their current job for the next year and twice as likely to have the intent to stay at their current company for the long haul for many years to come. We have a lot of talk today around creating people-first cultures, which is awesome. But sometimes that still feels void of clarity on what that really means. But people first means putting people's needs first. And when we get to that need satisfaction, that's when we have the job satisfaction. I'm not going to take the time to go through all of the numbers, but when these human needs are strong, it leads to happy, healthy, high-performing teams, where we get all of those benefits we talked about at the beginning that we want, like less stress and burnout and greater psychological safety and connection and motivation. And we do have our full research report available to download on our site. If you are like us and you love data and you want to check it out, that is available for you. Now, I want to briefly talk about stress and burnout just a little bit. A powerful definition of stress is that it's how we respond when our needs are not met. Unmet motives leads to greater stress at work. Feeling your work self, for example, has to be very different from what you think of as your true self. The unmet belonging motive is going to create stress. Being passed up for a promotion because of your age, race, or gender. Unmet fairness motive creates stress. Experiencing consequences as the result of expressing dissenting opinions or concerns, the unmet free expression motive, that is going to create stress. We're often taught stress management techniques like taking little breaks throughout the day, doing some self-care, or for employees, really giving them a mental health day off or happy hours and free lunches. And, these things can be appreciated and they can absolutely support motives. I mean, I love a self-care mental health day off, but often they are band-aids to deeper work wounds. But when we really identify the unmet motives, we shift from that surface level stress management to stressor management, treating for the root cause. When your team, for example, is stressed, a good question to ask yourself is, well, what are the unmet needs that are showing up here for my team? When we talk about burnout, we often talk about overwork, which is 1,000% true, but it's not just about overwork. Our research and other data supports this as well, shows that when there is a mismatch between someone's needs and the opportunities and demands of the workplace, burnout happens. So if you look at these different burnout indicators, feeling my job is meaningless, being bored, feeling disengaged, again, we can trace this back to needs that are unmet or undermet. So feeling like you have a lack of control, having negative work relationships, feeling a lack of recognition, or continuously just doing the same monotonous work. So now I want to dive into cultivating the motives mindset now that we've laid the foundation a little bit, because anything we want to do, change, or become starts in our brains and belief systems first. So this is really the foundation for that 5-step roadmap we are going to tackle at the end of this webinar. And there are 6 big mindset shifts we're going to talk about. And this first one's a big one. We're going to spend a little bit more time here, but this comes back to that idea of creating this shared meaning and mindset with your employees around well-being at work. So it's shifting from well-being at work being this kind of vague, undefined goal, or maybe how we've been thinking about it, to defining well-being at work as when people's most important motives are met. Many of you may be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's one of the most popular models in psychology and management from the 1940s, but it's been disproven by so many in modern times because research shows that these human needs aren't experienced in a strict order. People often strive for higher level needs while their safety needs remain unmet. So someone may give up security to pursue their passion, or for some employees, belonging and social needs might be prioritized over personal achievement. But again, often the world is pushing this set hierarchy on us. Coming back to the idea of, the articles that say the 3 things your employees want most, or if you want a great culture, do these 5 things. We have to learn to tune that out a little bit and take some of it with a grain of salt, because our research painted a clear picture that all of these 28 motives matter, but they do not matter equally to each person or team. There is no fixed hierarchy. It's discovering what your and your employees' needs hierarchy is, because what matters most to me is going to be very different than what matters most to each of you on this call today. Jim Collins is the author of the book Good to Great. It's a very popular book you may have heard of, but he says it really well that if you have more than 3 priorities, you have none. Using 28 motives as a compass to try and make decisions for ourselves or each employee isn't going to work real well. We all have limited time, dollars, energy, and resources, so we have to know where to focus. But we don't always know where to focus. We all have blind spots. We don't always know what we need most, let alone what others need most. We're busy. We're trying to get through the day. We're not really paying attention to motives. So that's why we developed our assessment tool, our human needs assessment, to help identify what are those top 5 motives driving each person to be well and perform well at work. So it's a 15-minute assessment that you take online and you get automatically your motive report that gives you all sorts of insights, ideas, tips, and questions related to your top motives. And on the leadership side, you get a great team report, a discussion activity guide, an interactive dashboard. Now, Jim Collins said you shouldn't have more than 3 priorities. So we did cheat a little bit. We have 5. But instead of guessing or assuming the well-being drivers and motivators for your employees, this shines a spotlight on what matters most. And if a motive isn't in someone's top 5, it doesn't mean they necessarily find it unimportant. And we also provide people their secondary support motives. But we all have a few human needs that rise to the top in importance and influence in this season, while other motives may be unimportant or they just might not be as critical of a well-being driver. And what we really want to do here is shift from passive and reactive when it comes to well-being, which can kind of be our default, to proactive and preventative, because prevention is better than cure. We don't want to wait until motives are suffering and employees are leaving and we're disengaged and we reach burnout. So we really want to take that preventative approach. Now, I helped to do the research and build the algorithm, but for me, even I had a motive that was a surprise in my top 5. I had a feeling flexibility and autonomy would be top motives for me. And they are still top motives today. So this is back in 2020 when I took our assessment for the first time. And it is interesting to see which motives kind of align with people's values. But security was kind of a shocker for me because I'm more of a risk taker by nature. But at the time, I was leaving, 2 businesses behind to move on and start Motives Met. And so this security motive was kind of holding me back, and it was vital information about myself. So having this newfound awareness, whether it's about you or others on your team, is really powerful. Our assessment, of course, is a resource you can consider, but you don't have to use our assessment. You could have each employee select 5 motives to focus on and use those as their top 5. But if you do want a free code to check it out, you can just shoot us an email at theteam@motivesmet.com and just put the word code in the subject line. And someone on our team will send over a link and a code, and you can go and take it for free and check it out. But when you focus on these motives that matter most, it's this great gateway to understand, be mindful of, evaluate, communicate, and then ultimately meet these motives for ourselves, the people we work with, and the people that we lead so that everybody can thrive together. And just by doing this, by going through this exercise, you're not just telling employees you care about their well-being, you're really showing them that. And that's something we hear time and time again from teams is, wow, taking the time to do this, actually, actions speak louder than words, and it really goes a long way. And teams also find it really fun and interesting to see what's rising to the top for their collective group and why. It can illuminate values, areas of weakness, points of connection and disconnection. And this is an example from a team we did a few weeks ago where 11 out of 12 members on this team had free expression as a top motive, and became really interesting for the team to discuss why is that? Why is that so important to us? So there's some really great pivotal conversations that comes from kind of looking at these motives at the team or group level. Now, shifting into mindset shift 2, taking a personalized approach. So moving from that one size fits all mindset to well-being and motivation is personal. We don't want to take this kind of one size fits none leadership approach. We want to take a human-centered leadership approach. As I mentioned, motives shift over time. So today, these are my top needs. I still have flexibility, autonomy, and future success as top motives for me, but prestige and trustworthy leadership are now in my top 5. So motives don't change one day to the next, but if you think about yourself, what you needed most 10 years ago to thrive at work is probably going to be a bit different than what you need today. But it is vital that the people I work with or my manager really knows these things about me, why they're so important to me. And it's a game changer for me to hear from my team why their motives are so important to them and what they mean to them and which ones are easy and which ones are a challenge. And people feel so seen and heard when you have these discussions. And this is kind of how we get to know each other on that deeper human level. But you want to lead, coach, advocate, and inspire based on what uniquely drives each person. Mindset shift 3 is overcoming what we call this work happiness delusion, from things are going to be perfect to what we call the attainable dream of a work life well lived. So our data place these motives specifically around our wheel. Motives next to one another have a higher correlation, they have more in common, while motives that are across from one another are more different. They're not necessarily opposites, but there's more of a tension that can exist between them. And this tension can happen internally and externally. So work-life harmony and future success could be a point of internal contention, going, I have all this work I want to do towards these big goals, but I also need to find kind of more work-life balance. So that could be a struggle. Or in one workshop, it was really interesting. One person on the team was very driven by security, the other person very driven by innovation. And that kind of caused them to butt heads. And it was important to kind of understand that about one another. But what this comes down to is really learning to live in the tension of these needs while and doing it together. So it's not about perfection or an unattainable ideal, but about optimization. So addressing tension points that could be harming performance and engagement, and accepting that these motive conflicts exist, being at peace with that, communicating about motives, and we're going to talk a lot about that in a bit, compromising at times, being strategic and intentional, and sometimes making tough choices. And this is tough. Doing this is really difficult. But one thing that's been really cool in teams is we've heard from leaders that this helps teams and employees have more compassion for you. They start to understand there are 28 of these different needs. Everybody has different needs that are most important, and sometimes they conflict. And it gets everybody to have a little bit more of an ambitious but yet realistic point of view when it comes to a thriving culture. The fourth mindset shift is embracing motive diversity, moving from some motives are better than others to there are no favorites. Unconscious biases can really lead us to judge or overlook the needs of others. There are certain motives, whether it be achievement or purpose, that can be idealized in our own minds or put on a pedestal or be a buzzword, while other motives can be dismissed. Fun can be thought of as frivolous or appreciation as an afterthought. But the key to creating inclusive workplaces is respecting and valuing the full spectrum of these human needs, because sometimes it's not about how do we, connect, it's about how do we limit judgment. And it's really detrimental when leaders place unfair judgment on motives. A really interesting research stat I thought is that managers sometimes misjudge people by believing that if they're not calling oriented, if they're not driven by purpose, that they lack the same performance and commitment as those who say they are. So kind of coming back to these statements I shared at the beginning, some employees don't need as strong of a purpose to thrive at work, but that doesn't mean that they're underperformers or they're not as engaged. I had an employee share with me, I don't have a lot of meaning in my job, but I do really well. I love the people I work with, and I have the flexibility to pursue my passions and purpose outside of work. And that's what I need to be happy in and outside of work. Or again, work-life harmony doesn't always equal work well-being. For me, work-life harmony isn't a top motive. I would love to have had more of it last year when I was writing my book, but I didn't have a lot of it because I was so dedicated to my big goals for my future success, which is one of my top motives. But sometimes I would have people say to me, "Oh, don't you have a work well-being platform? Shouldn't you work less?" And it wasn't coming from a bad place, but if you start to pay attention, you'll see that there can be a lot of judgment in the world, a lot of kind of assuming that how we feel is how others feel. What we need is what others need. And the last example I'll give is there was a manager that we were working with who said, I am so good about helping my team with growth opportunities. We meet every few months. It's something that I really pay attention to. And we said, that's great, but growth is just one of those 28 motives. So what if someone isn't in a growth spurt? What if they've been growing a lot the last year and they really need other things? Growth isn't necessarily the holy grail. So we want to just try to pay attention to where we may have biases and where our company or team may hold biases as well. Mindset shift number 5 is creating a thriving culture is on you as a leader, and really changing and flipping the script to culture belongs to everybody, that people need to really create it together. Well-being happens, we say, when individuals and work peers and coworkers and leaders and HR show up in meaningful ways to keep these needs healthy. So the degree that any motive is going to be strong is going to be influenced by everybody at work. If you put any motive in the middle of that diagram, whether it's growth, free expression, work-life harmony, everybody is going to impact it. So well-being is co-created. It is a joint effort, a shared responsibility, and opportunity to make a difference. Yes, Beth. Yes, the pressure is off. Yes, it is. So what this all ladders up to is creating a culture where it's an otherish culture, where people aren't selfish. They're not focused only on their own needs. They aren't selfless. They don't disregard their own needs to, their own detriment. That people are otherish, that they strike a balance between their own needs while still caring for others. And this concept comes from Adam Grant, who's an organizational psychologist. He says, if takers are selfish and failed givers are selfless, successful givers are otherish. They care about benefiting others, but they also have ambitious goals for advancing their own interests. So really, you want to get people to commit to kind of this otherish mindset, and that makes a huge difference, because there are a lot of small things everybody can do to support the motives of others, even if they aren't quite as important to me. And the last shift is all around humanizing work. So really going from, you need to hide your feelings to stay professional, to giving people permission to be human at work. Ultimately, these motives are about how we want to feel at work and how we don't want to feel at work. So when motives in the significance domain are met, we are going to feel greater gratitude and valued and respected. And when motives are weak, we're going to have a less desirable emotional experience. We'll feel stagnant, maybe bored, lonely, fearful. So when your motives are well met, that is when you are going to be motivated in a much more positive direction at work. And I love this quote, that having needs is not evidence of weakness, it is human. We are often taught that professionalism equals dehumanization, that we should put on our workplace armor, as Brene Brown calls it, for anyone who's familiar with her work, and just try to ignore our basic human biology to show up as unemotional robots. But that's just not possible. So motives matter because how we feel at work matters, and understanding motives as these emotional triggers with your employees really expands everybody's emotional intelligence in a big way. So just to kind of summarize these shifts, there isn't this magical answer or golden ticket to well-being at work, but we do have kind of what we call our no BS approach based on all of these insights and research. And it's this 5-step roadmap that I touched on just briefly. But when you follow this roadmap, you help yourself and your team members to understand, be mindful, evaluate, communicate, and ultimately meet these motives so that you can create a culture where people have health and happiness. So we're going to take the time to go through each of these steps. But I love a great mountain analogy. I've only gone to Everest Base Camp, actually. I've not gone to the peak, but I was on a leadership podcast, and the host was saying, my God, this is the Everest of leadership. And I loved that analogy because it's true. We're saying there aren't these easy shortcuts that a lot of people in the world want to say there is. It is a big challenge, but it's also a huge reward. And you're not meant to make this climb alone. You as a leader need to follow this roadmap for yourself, to care for your own motives, and to lead with motives in mind, but you need to inspire and lead your employees to walk it with you, because that's how you're going to get to the peak. And you have to give yourself and give your managers the 3 T's, as we call it, the time, training, and tools to really make following this roadmap possible. So I briefly want to just touch on each of these steps on the pathway. We want to create this shared meaning and mindset now with your employees because you've spent the time today to hear all this good stuff. You have this newfound perspective, and now you want to share that with employees so that everybody can be on the same page. We've developed what we call our 10 work-life well-lived principles that are kind of these fundamental truths to live by to help you develop that mindset. And we've kind of gone through most of these today, or we will cover them in the next few slides, but you're going to have access to this presentation so you can kind of come back and look at these and share these with your team to kind of deepen that understanding. And you're going to want to share these mindset shifts, these key concepts, motive diversity, and again, really unite people behind the goal to co-create a thriving culture, to really elevate these motives and really get everybody, on the bandwagon to do that and co-create it together. Then you want to lead with motives in mind, taking that personalized approach we talked about and really cultivating overall a culture where motive mindfulness is strong. So one really great thing to do is not only adopt this motive mindset for yourself, but also do a leadership audit of yourself. Identify, going through each of the 28 motives, where are your strengths? Where do you think you might have weaknesses? And what are different actions you want to take to help lead with intention? So some great questions that you can ask yourself are, how mindful am I of each of these 28 motives? Where is there stress and burnout that are signs of unmet needs? How can I create that safety and trust for employees to be human and share their emotional experience from unmet motives? And again, what biases may I be bringing into the workplace? And how can we better embrace this idea of motive diversity on our team or in our organization? And then you want to empower, again, that motive discovery. So identify the motives that matter most, have employees share their motives with one another, and look at what is rising to the top for your collective group or team. Now, this third step is to evaluate motives. You want to make sure you're identifying which motives are thriving and which ones are suffering and why, and having this data to work and grow from and these KPIs to track over time. And if I asked you right now the degree to which your team members have well-being and why, could you articulate that in a meaningful, data-driven way? Most leaders struggle with this question because evaluating concepts like well-being and happiness and satisfaction is a tough thing to do. But with the 28 motives, it makes it more straightforward. You have a way to measure the things that matter most. And you can do this either in qualitative research, which we're going to talk a little bit more about next, kind of communicating about this stuff, or in quantitative research. So you can do a really simple survey that will help you identify motive health buckets, which motives are drowning, which ones are coasting, which ones are thriving or barely surviving. And again, you'll have access to this deck, but it's asking just really simple questions. How well met are each of your top 5 motives? To what degree do we create the conditions in our organization for each of these motives to thrive? You're going to get some really good insights from doing a very simple survey like this. The fourth step is communicate, and this is a biggie. You want to create the space for motive conversations to be happening at work. Our research shows in the last year, 33% of employees said their boss has never met with them to talk about their job satisfaction and well-being at work, and 31% said only once. And we know this silence costs us because if employees aren't getting their needs met, as our research shows, they're going to walk out the door. So it's really important to have these stay interviews so you're not stuck having the exit interviews. And of course, you may lose employees if you can't deliver on all of their motives, and we have to accept that. But the important question is, could you have kept them? If you had known this vital information about the health of their motives, could you have kept them? And a lot of times the answer is yes. So motives can often just be a missing conversation at work, but we have to talk about these needs if we want to be able to strengthen them and protect them at work. And not just talking about the stuff that isn't working, but it is so important to talk about the good stuff. And I wish I had more time on this webinar because I would love to share some of the stories that we've heard in team workshops and some of the magic that happens when people are sharing their histories around these motives and why certain people on the team really lift them up and what they really appreciate about their culture. And we don't really have the space a lot to talk about that stuff. And it's so powerful. So you want to be having one-on-ones just to talk about employees' motives, not about performance, not about project deadlines, but really just a space to ask meaningful motive questions and to really cultivate the psychological safety to make these conversations the norm and, not scary conversations in your culture. Because it is really tough to walk in your boss's office and say, "You're micromanaging me and it's driving me crazy." Or it's tough in a team meeting to be like, "Hey, I don't think everybody appreciates me enough." Or the person with the most power in the room always dominates the conversation. But as Amy Edmondson, who is the pioneer of psychological safety, says, there is nothing more powerful than asking good questions to create psychological safety. So it's great to ask employees if they're happy and healthy, but if we ask better questions, we're going to get better answers. And we're going to amplify psychological safety. We're going to create a brave space. Questions are really invitations to answers that you wouldn't get otherwise. So, we can ask, what's one area of your job you'd like more freedom in, and how can I support that? Or what's one area of stress on our team that you think could be avoided or lessened if we made some simple changes? Now, often we hear, wow, that sounds like a lot of work having all these one-on-one conversations and I don't have the time. And that all we can empathize with, but I love to drop in this little bit of inspiration from Monty Moran, who is the CEO of Chipotle for 8 years. And he was responsible for bringing Chipotle to the status of a Fortune 500 company and creating this incredible company culture. And he attributes that to the 20,000 one-on-one conversations he had with employees. And he didn't even do this virtually. He literally flew to Chipotle's all over the country as CEO and would meet with a line cook to a senior manager. And that is how he said he got all of this insight and information to make Chipotle's culture what it became. So you also want to give team members the opportunity to craft what we call their motive stories and share them. This is another really powerful thing you can do with communicating around motives, because storytelling has been proven to be linked with greater mental health and well-being benefits. And when we share our stories, we're connecting as our human selves, not just our work selves. So crafting our story with prompts like, "These motives matter to me because," or "One current challenge is," "One thing you may not know about me related to my motives," or "I'm grateful the team is good at supporting this motive in this way," or "These motives help support my well-being and performance because." Because of course we are not going to remember everybody's motives and we don't need to. But when we share these stories, we remember key insights, ways to support one another, a new perspective. So it's really, really just about creating the space for all of this dialogue to happen. And last but not least, I want to move on to the meat motives. There's a little bit more when it comes to communication, but I'm going to discuss that as part of this step because we want to start thinking about developing our action plan. Meeting motives can be a lot of different things. It's mindset. It's maybe having the belief that we innovate best when we blend our unique ideas, not when we conform to the same way we've always been thinking, or that we're going to focus on a culture add mindset, not a culture fit. So, we don't unintentionally reinforce a sense of conformity. It can be small things. It can be micro actions and steps. You could have each person choose a passion project they get to dedicate time to for the passion motive. You can try out one no meeting day a week. You can honor diverse cultures with floating rather than fixed holidays. There are all sorts of these small ideas that can make a big impact. And then, of course, there's bigger to-dos. There's technology and software solutions to help you more effectively achieve certain goals. You can give employees a monthly connection stipend where they get an expense to bond with another person at your organization outside of work. You can develop new pay transparency policies. You could shift to a hybrid model with anchor days from in-person in the office. And then there's the to-don'ts, which can be just as important. What are those no's and boundaries? We're going to say no to those unreasonable last-minute client deadlines. Or we're going to stop letting less important work that feels urgent get in the way of more meaningful work. And then there's the support we need from others. Where do we need to have conversations, advocate for budgets, seek out experts and help? And then also celebrating what's going well, reinforcing that, sharing in that gratitude is a really important way to meet and elevate these motives as well. So you want to be using all of the ideas you gather on this pathway. If you do all of these steps, by the time you get to meet motives, you are going to have a ton of stuff to work with. And you're going to be able to ideate on ideas. You're going to be able to get together with other leaders and seek out resources to help you come up with different actions. And you really want to gather input from your employees. If you get your employees together, they will come up with amazing mindset ideas, to-don'ts, small to-dos, big to-dos to elevate these different motives. So you really want to make sure you are tapping into them. And there are a few tips I'm going to just share around some of these motives. And of course, I mean, we could do like hours of this presentation just talking about tips related to motives. But for example, for prestige, you want to build a strong organizational brand and really share the prideful work and wins across your organization. A lot of times there's so much good stuff going on, but not everybody knows about it. And while that's a great tip, what's just as powerful is to go talk to your employees about this motive. What are a few things you wish our company or team could do to elevate our prestige, either within the organization or the outside world? Where do you want to most personally contribute to make our team one that we're proud of? With the passion and purpose motives, really cultivating this intention-based mindset and setting intentions for the work your team does, which is a way to really motivate people who are, in line with this motive for their well-being. And it's powerful to, just ask them, where does your heart for doing meaningful work do? How do you make a positive impact on our team or organization? And with motives in the freedom domain, you can do a freedom framework, creating a framework for expectations and boundaries, but including the goals and values and allowing your team to decide how they want to achieve those objectives. But it's also asking them, where does having flexibility and meaningful choices matter most to you? If you could have greater freedom in one or two areas, what would it be? For work-life harmony, it's encouraging employees, of course, to pursue both personal and professional goals, but making a simple process for them to raise their hand when their workload is harming this motive. And asking them, of all your interests and commitments outside of work, which is most important to you? And if we could make one or two changes that would help you have more time for those, what could that be? And for motives in the significance domain, it's going beyond thank yous to express to someone how they impacted you personally. How did they make you feel? How did you benefit on a personal level from something that they did? And of course, asking them, what are their greatest contributions? Where do they feel they add most value and where do they feel others add most value? So asking employees these questions is going to give you so many ideas, and then you'll be able to kind of start putting pen to paper and looking at where you want to focus and delegating that plan. And we want to make sure we're looking at the action plan for motives at all of these three levels. So if you're in HR, if you're a senior leader, embedding human motives into the broader cultural norms, policies, and practices, looking at, again, the collective team and what's rising to the top there and providing focus and unified goals. And then, of course, looking at each individual employee. So you'll have a people first action plan that's more at that organizational and team level, taking motives and looking at how healthy are they? What are the obstacles? What are the different ideas we've come up with? And how would I prioritize those? What's their difficulty? What's the key milestones and other key stakeholders and resources I need? So it's kind of starting to put pen to paper as it comes to all of these different motive ideas. And you're also going to want a person-centered action plan. When you have a one-on-one with an employee about their motives, you want to leave with really just a simple chart like this. These are their top 5 motives. Let's talk about what's going well and where they're winning. Let's talk about challenges. Let's look at a few actions the employee is going to take, a few actions I'm going to take or our team is going to take. And it's really having this snapshot for each person that you lead that creates this culture of work wellness. Now, of course, walking this pathway is not linear, right? We don't just get to this destination and then we're done. This is something that we kind of have to continuously embed into our culture. But we want to make sure we're reflecting so that we can really commit to well-being. So just thinking about what's it going to cost you, your team, your organization, if you don't prioritize well-being. Who else in your organization is a champion that you can partner with and kind of work on this, work on these initiatives with, who would really help you and be another advocate? And what's like one or two things you could start doing and stop doing based on all these insights? And last but not least, what are just a few small steps you can take? There's so much, obviously, I've shared with you today, but just what's one or two things over the next month you could do to elevate motives at work? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Kaylee, and then I will answer any questions if we have some time to do that.
I loved all of this, Kelly. I agree with what you said earlier. I feel like we could do like a 2 or 3 hour webinar on all of this. But so amazing. I did have one question come in through the Q&A that I think we can get to before I share the Sherman HRCI codes, but it is regarding causes of burnout, have you found a meaningful difference between that caused by chronic stress and that more driven by more like a boredom or a lack of purpose? Some people distinguish between burnout and bore out.
Mm. It's going to be dependent. That's, I think, what gets to be a challenge is it's going to be very much based on each individual. So someone could be experiencing burnout because they are bored to death at their job, and that's really their issue. Or someone else, it might be overwork, or it might be I have a micromanager and I have no autonomy in my job. So it's going to be very dependent on the person, and that's why kind of being able to lead those conversations and understand which motives matter most is really helpful.
I love that. A great answer. And I agree with you, Rose, in the chat. This has been a really eye-opening and actionable webinar. So thank you so much for that, Kelly. I am going to share my screen just super quick for us to wrap up. I did just share the SHRM and HRCI codes in the chat, but the sponsor of today's webinar is GoCo. I am the marketing campaigns manager here at GoCo. So if you've been on some of our webinars before, you've probably seen me. But at GoCo, we are an HRIS, and our mission is to really get those, mundane, manual tasks kind of off of your plate as an HR professional or even leadership in general and automate those so that you can have more time to focus on building happier, healthier, more productive teams. And then I can't talk about GoCo without talking about our incredible client success team. 5 stars each client of ours gets a hands-on implementation and a dedicated team. And if you're interested to learn more about GoCo and how we can give you more time back in your day to focus on your people, then you can scan this QR code, or I'm also going to launch a poll to see if you'd like to chat with us and see what we can work on together. And I did share the Sherman HRCI codes in the chat, but you'll also be able to find them here, and I will share them in the chat one more time. You'll also get this in the follow-up email as well. And I'll leave this up for just a couple more minutes, but Kelly, we have so much great feedback in the chat about this. Very informative. Thank you. Great information. A lot of new perspectives, like you mentioned, that people might not have heard before. So this has been great.
Well, thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed this, and I could have talked for hours and hours, which I think you probably could have told. I was trying to get through all the information. Thank you so much, Kaylee. This was amazing.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And thank you everyone who took time out of your day to join us today. You will be getting the recording and slides afterwards, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Thank
one.
Bye.
Bye, Kelly.